Have you ever been in a situation where the people around you are in an absolute stink? That prolonged state of negativity where it seems like nothing you do and nothing you say, no matter how well intentioned you are, nothing can encourage them to come back into their heart. Well, on today's episode, I'm sharing my list of 10 things that I found helpful when I'm dealing with intense negativity. Now, if you can assimilate even one of these in the heat of the moment, you'll be doing yourself and that other person a very big favour. Let's do this. Hit it, Kim.
Welcome to the Be a Brilliant Human podcast. You're in the right place if you're a growth-seeking being who acknowledges the challenges and delights of your humanity on the path to an ever more conscious life. If you want to feel inspired to love and accept yourself, to feel free to be and express you in all your brilliance, if you want to truly value yourself and others and feel energized and alive both at home and in the world, then sit back and take a breath as you explore and grow the brilliance of your beautiful human self with your host, the father of non-personal awareness and creator of the MPA process, Joel Young.
Hello, and welcome to the Be a Brilliant Human podcast with me, Joel Young. We are at episode number 58, and I'm so glad you're here. If you're brand new, I'm delighted you found us. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified when each episode comes out, and which does on a Tuesday. And if you're back for more, I love that you're here, and I hope that you're enjoying the show. Do let me know, by the way. You can get in touch via social media at Joel Young MPA for the most part. It's just youtube.com/Joel Young if you're there. And of course, you can leave me a message via the website for the show, which is www.beabrillianthuman.com. And the show notes for today's episode will be there, www.beabrillianthuman.com/58. In fact, the entire back catalogue, if you want to do a lucky dip, pick a number between now and 58, or if you're listening in the future, whatever date we're up to, just put / the number and see what comes up. Have a bit of fun. I can't believe it's November already. The nights are drawing in, the clocks have gone. Well, are they back, I guess? Fall back, spring forward. That's the one. They've gone back. And here in the UK, as I'm recording this at the beginning of November, we're going into lockdown again. It's 2020 lockdown part 2. Oh my goodness. When's it going to end, folks? How are you doing in lockdown? You can let me know about that as well. When we went into the first lockdown back in March, I did a series of episodes about, the issues that I was hearing coming up around lockdown. Who knows what it's going to be like this time? And if you're in a different country, I think most of the world is doing something lockdowny again as we hit that second wave of the coronavirus. And if you're listening, like thousands of years in the future, yes, there was a time, it was called the Mad 2020 year, where there was this thing called COVID-19 and everything went a bit weird. All right. Well, one of the issues in the last lockdown was the rise in domestic disputes, which, I laugh at things a lot, but it's a major issue, actually. People being stuck inside, all their stuff coming up, and a lot of stuff there happening. And as we're going into a second lockdown, it seemed like a good time for me to look at dealing with negativity and being in situations where you're dealing with a lot of negativity coming your way. Now, this is the Be a Brilliant Human show. So as ever, I'll be coming at this in terms of, basic human interaction. It comes from, or in the understanding that human relations are often where, our deepest crap hits the proverbial fan, and where our more enlightened aspects, they often don't get a look in that heat of the moment. Now, I've experienced intense negativity many times and in many relationships in my life. So what I'm sharing here are some of the sort of valuable lessons that I've learned along the way. Now, in quite a few of these, I'm also going to be offering some further resources. And all of those will be linked to in the show notes, again, which you can find at www.beabrillianthuman.com/58 for this episode. So 10 ways to deal with intense negativity. Here we go. So number 1 is rethink the label negativities. So when you label someone's expression as negative, you're going to enter dangerous territory. Now, it's not that I'm saying there's anything intrinsically bad or wrong with the term negativity. I'm simply suggesting you examine what you're really saying when you use it. And in a way, more importantly, how that impacts your experience, your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors. Now, I could say a lot of about this one, but the main point I want to make here is to highlight that in the context of heated interactions, watch out for the tendency to fall into the trap of using the term negativity as one of the following. So using it as a judgment, as a defense, as an attack from a position of superior enlightenment, or to assert yourself as a victim, or to negate their perspective or deny their experience. Quite a list there. But each one of those will actually cause you pain, and I'm encouraging you to be as aware as possible how your label for their experience impacts your experience. Now, if you're a dedicated fan, you might notice that I'm repeating some stuff that I talked about in episode number 7. In fact, episode number 7, I went into a lot more detail on the impact of labels, especially the negativity label. So if you want to go deeper with this idea of rethink the label negativity, then episode 7 will be a great episode to listen to next as you have a little bit more time. And you can find that, of course, at www.beabrillianthuman.com/7. And also, of course, all of these references will be in the show notes for today. Number 2 is drop your agenda. So when we're uncomfortable with someone else's expression, it's very easy to get stuck in the idea that they ought to be different than they are. After all, you can see that they would be much happier if they only followed your helpful advice. And of course, it would certainly be easier for you. But again, I'm not saying that your helpful insights, aren't amazing, aren't awesome. If they did do what's bleeding obvious to you, perhaps they would feel a whole lot better. But the slippery slope here is when, you become attached to your way, and then suddenly you're in the realm where you have an agenda. Now, agendas limit possibility. They can actually make you go literally deaf and blind to the other person, even to yourself. And they tend to create these sort of strong undercurrents of pressure, to have these agendas fulfilled. Now, pressure and heat is exactly what you need for an explosion. Just think of a volcano. And the truth is that the other person needs to be where they are right now, at least for now. Now, as humans, we tend to resist when our natural pace is forced. So bringing that agenda in is going to sort of effectively trying to force their pace. And that's where you get that pressure, that heat, and then you're looking at a potential explosion. And of course, there'll be time for your suggestions or for offering your perspective or for finding a way through that works for them, whether you agree with it or not. But that time might not be now. So when you drop your agenda, you'll be much more available to notice that moment when it arises. Now, if you've listened for a while to this show, you'll know I beat the drum of having no agenda over and over. Plus, it's something, it's a bit like MPA's superpower. If you do any of the training with me, you'll be learning not only a great tool, the tool of MPA, non-personal awareness, something for life, but it will help, that'll help you navigate all sorts of tricky waters. But the deeper thing that you get in the trainings is you'll be learning kind of the agendaless way, really, how to be agendaless and the wonderful, wonderful gifts that brings. And speaking of MPA, that brings us to number 3. Number 3 for dealing with intense negativity is don't take it personally. Well, of course, this list would not be complete without a reference to, to MPA, would it? And in case you don't know MPA, if you're brand new, you might go, you keep saying MPA. What's MPA? So the MPA process is a simple way to stop taking things personally. It's amazing. It's a bit like, one way to describe MPA is it's a bit like Teflon for the soul. So when we take things personally, it's like we let stuff stick to us, like literally stick to us, like a yucky old frying pan. with no oil, and no non-stick on it. MPA is like it gives you that Teflon coating. Doesn't mean you don't experience things fully or have a wonderful sensitivity to life, but it means that yucky stuff can slide off and you don't end up with literal egg on your face or egg all over the metaphorical pan of your life. All right, so lots of wise sages, if we get back to not taking things personally, they've advised people not to take things personally, and that is good advice. And I've dedicated now nearly a decade and a half of my life to sharing this sort of multifaceted and fundamentally non-personal nature of reality. And sometimes, especially in these situations, it comes down to this. It's just not about you. Their negativity, their expression, the way they're throwing at you, it's not about you. But of course, when someone's deepest doo-doo is being flung in your face, it can be easier said than done to not take it personally. But fortunately, as I've just been saying, the human race now has access to the MPA process, which gives us a simple and effective way to cut through the shit, that's pun intended there, and then come up smelling of roses. I might be mixing my metaphors there, I don't know, but I've experienced it myself, and I've heard over and over amazing feedback from people who have done this. What you do with MPA is you step away, take a moment, and do the MPA process. And what it does is it allows you it can stop you from taking it personally, and that means you become freer to act from a wholesome place. It's very simple. Again, just to those of you who haven't heard of MPA before, it's a spoken word process. It's very simple, very quick to do. One of the, the environment in which it was born was an environment where I was working with a process which was, took a long time. People would take hours to get through a specific issue. And I think somewhere deep inside of me, I was calling out for, is there a quicker, easier way to deal with this stuff so we can kind of get on with life rather than letting the personal development processes become our life? How about we had something simple that you could just, again, step away, do them, things would pass, and you could move on and into the adventure of life even deeper. And that's what MPA is. That's what MPA gives you. So if you haven't already, go and download the sheet. You can get the sheet for free, which will give you the 6 simple lines and some basic instruction. And you can do that via, again, it'll be there in the show notes, beabrillianthuman.com/ what's the one again? We're at number 58. I forgot my episode number there. /58. You can always find it on my main home MPA website, which is joelyoungmpa.com or nonpersonalawareness.com. They'll both go there. So go and download that if you haven't. It will help you. Again, just in an intense situation where as soon as you can, step away, go do the MPA process in relation to it, and you'll find yourself A, suffering less if you're not taking it as personally as you were, and B, generally much more resourceful to deal with the situation in a way which has an outcome that will serve you much better. That brings us to number 4. Number 4 is listen to them. Now, that suggestion might seem a little bit hard to swallow. Really, it's going to require you to sort of genuinely get the hang of suggestions 1, 2, and 3. So drop the label of negativity, drop the agenda and not take it personally, before you're going to be able to really listen. But when you do really listen, magic can happen. Now, there can be lots of sort of fake or faux or, well-intentioned, but not really listening that's going on, especially when there's an agenda at play in the background. In fact, when you've got that going on, you're not really listening. Now, in episode 8, I went deep into this topic, so I'm not going to say much more on this, but if your listening isn't effective or it's hard for you, then go and check out that on episode number 8. So again, beabrillianthuman.com/8. Again, go to the show notes is an easy way for today. We'll easily find that if you're there already. What I will say here is that truly listening can be miraculous, and be aware that listening in order to get a miracle, that's an agenda. You're back there again. So again, listening without an agenda is just that. It's listening. There's nothing added. And you might be amazed what gets said, by the person when they realize that you're actually listening to them. So number 5 then is kind of the reverse. Number 5 is listen to you. So there's a saying that misery loves company, which kind of points to our very natural human longing for agreement. Now, in the heat of their deepest pain, people often seek agreement from those around them. And, when I when I say seek, it often comes out as demand, right? So our culture's actually full of mixed messages in this arena. For example, we're taught, it's kind and loving to sympathize and support someone in their painful stories. That's something that many would agree with. And in my opinion, there is a place for this, in the bish-bosh of day-to-day human bonding. Validation can be an important part of dialogue. On the other hand, though, we're told where attention goes, energy flows, which, in this context is kind of a rebranding of don't throw fuel on the fire. In other words, if you give their negativity attention, it's just going to get worse. Well, that can be true as well, Then again, sometimes that isn't the case. I'm sure, I've experienced both sides of that coin. I'm guessing you have too. And there's the old chestnut. If you don't put them straight, they'll never learn. Sometimes a strong alternative perspective is exactly what's needed. Now, the reality is there's no one approach that's going to be right for all situations. And you can't really know, how the other person will respond, whichever path you choose. So do you sympathize? Do you challenge? Do you ignore? Do you confront? What to do? Well, here's the thing. It's a matter of contextual discernment. And all you can really do here is listen to you as best you can and follow those inner prompts, knowing that they ultimately are going to come from some wider awareness. Plus, this way, at least you stay with yourself. And on that note, that brings us to number 6. So number 6 is to ask yourself, is it kind to me? Is it kind to me? Now, this inner inquiry is it's one of my go-to kind of internal mantras, really. And it came to me in the middle of a drawn-out domestic around 15 years ago. But kindness has always been important to me. But the question I used to ask was focused very much in that outward direction. What's the kind thing for me to do? Would kind of get translated as, how can I express kindness towards them? What I realized, though, is that sometimes my attempt at kindness would be very painful for me. And, it would often backfire and cause even greater stress in my beloved at the time. The thing is, I was excluding myself completely from the kindness equation. So on this occasion, when this came to me, I was laying next to my then wife, both of us worn out from a long fight. I knew she was still mad at me and, very much unresolved. And the truth was that so was I. But, my usual urge to make peace came up in me, to open my heart and reconnect, that sort of urge. And I began to reach out my hand, to touch her softly and to comfort her. But it was kind of weird. Suddenly the words rang kind of loudly in my head. Is it kind to you, Joel? And my hand kind of stopped in its tracks, and the realization dawned, well, no, it bloody well isn't kind to me. It's not true. Then I realized it wouldn't really have been kind to her either. It would have been a false move. It was actually coming from my agenda to stop the discomfort that I felt with the conflict. It would have been a lie to her and a lie to myself. So my hand kind of withdrew itself, and I lay there in the truth and just let her be, free to lay in hers. And sort of something in me actually softened. So my suggestion is, before you act to appease or to agree or to shout or to run or whatever, ask yourself first, is it kind to me? And if it is, then the chances are it's the kindest thing you can do all round. In fact, I'm such a big fan of this inner inquiry that, I even wrote an ebook about it. As I say that, I'm like, I bought the company. Show my age here. If you remember Remington Fuzzaway, let me know. I'm not alone here. What am I saying? Got myself off track. So yeah, I wrote a book. I wrote an ebook about it. I wanted to encourage people to embrace the be kind to you or be kind to me philosophy. The book is actually called Be Kind to You, 100 Days of Kindness, because kindness starts with you. Each day in the book is kind of a suggestion of how you can include yourself in that equation of kindness. Now, you can still get it for free. I'll drop the link in the show notes if you'd like to download that yourself. Again, the show notes are there at www.beabrillianthuman.com/58. So number 7, this is a simple one. Give yourself a break. All right, so here's the simple human reality, my dear listener. You're going to cock it up. Numbers 1 to 6 I've been through at some point, and in fact numbers 8 to 10 as well for that matter. You know, you're just going to cock it up. You're going to mess it up. That's your humanity. So give yourself a break. I want you to take in number 7 as just kind of a set point of radical self-forgiveness. I mean, sometimes you're just going to be like, I'm fed up with this unconscious negativity, the miserable bugger. Why don't they just think differently and do what I tell them, I don't know, it makes me laugh. I've been as kind as I possibly can in spite of their mood, Joel. What about me? Welcome to your humanity. It's a wonderful thing. Give yourself a break. If you catch yourself caught up in this, don't beat yourself up even more. It just tops off. It adds insult to injury. Give yourself a break. Forgive yourself. Take a breather. Reset when you can. Progress doesn't come without a good amount of stumbling and messing up. So that brings us to number 8. So number 8 is to remove yourself from the situation. So sometimes you've just got to get out. You've got to get away from it. Now, this links right back to listening to and being kind to you. So there's times, when it's time to stay and work it through. And there's times when something inside says it's time to go. Now, that's true in a small temporary way where you just need to take yourself out for a walk, a bike ride, for a coffee or whatever. And it can also be true in a bigger way where it's time to leave the relationship altogether or the situation altogether. So generally, when you listen and pay close attention to yourself and are willing to be kind to you, those 1,001 rational thoughts that would keep you in a painful, sort of crappy situation longer than it's true, don't get a look in. But I do here want to touch on something, in the context of the need to sometimes get out. And that's when, for some reason, much as you air quotes, should, you don't get out. So if you keep finding yourself or getting yourself or feeling trapped in these toxic situations, or you feel bad if you start putting your needs into the equation, there's probably deeper stuff that's going on and your boundaries are really at play here and your boundaries need some work. So as you probably know, if you've been listening to this podcast for some time, I've created a program called Boundary Bootcamp. And the whole reason I created Boundary Bootcamp was because I realized that I had been staying in a toxic situation despite all that I knew. I would listen to myself and be kind to me, for a while, but then I would capitulate and go back to the relationship. And that happened over and over and over again. At some point, I had to ask myself, what the actual F is going on in me? I mean, why, when I know it's harmful to me, do I keep going back? I just couldn't keep going around the cycle where I made it okay somehow, though obviously it really, really wasn't, and keep suffering hit after hit. And I realized, I was going to have to go deeper and look at what underpinned my willingness to ignore my own boundaries in intimate relationships. Now, what I realized in my particular situation was that there were all sorts of manipulations at play. And, I was falling for them and feeling like I was crazy. So I started educating myself, looking at all the manipulation tactics, how they worked, and importantly, what it was in me that allowed them to work. And why I was repeatedly allowing my boundaries to be crossed, really betraying my own boundaries and putting up with shit that felt so not okay with me. So it actually took a lot of trial and a lot of error over a longer than I care to admit time. I would break it off, say it's over, and then find myself going back just to have a break of promises and the behavior to continue on and on and on. Now, what became clear is there was a pattern to it. I'd say it's over, then there would be some rational need to meet in person. There would be wine and a conversation, and somewhere in that conversation, my brain would feel like it got put through the mincer. Nothing I said would get heard or acknowledged, and somehow it would lead to sex and everything, being shoved in a drawer for the next round. But I remember the day it all changed. Yes, I agreed to meet. Yes, there was wine. And honestly, I didn't know as I arrived at the bar if I was going to stay strong or if I was on track to fall for it again. But something this time in me was different. I was, somehow more aware, more awake to what was happening, awake to how I'd been before and how I needed to be. So I watched her, this time kind of with my eyes wide open. So the usual confusion tactics got rolled out. But this time, not only did I see them for what they were, but knew how to stay centered and how to respond in a way that held my boundary. Now, was I tempted to fold? Absolutely. I mean, those parts of me were still tugging and gnawing away at me, sort of crying out, just give in, to cave. But I held. And finally, when she ran out of all her usual options and she'd got nothing back from me, she went for full-on sexual seduction. The look of desire, the smile, the move, her soft lips locked onto mine with passion and intent. And in me, time slowed right down. It's like this was the ultimate test. It was the killer move. My body, my instincts, my conflicting emotions and desires, they all crashed together. This was the hack, if you like, that had melted my resolve every single time. So somewhere inside it got very still, very quiet, and a memory formed of when I was 7, under threat of violence from a woman if I didn't engage in sexual acts. To my body and my scared, confused 7-year-old mind, it seemed like there was no option but to go along. But in that still, quiet place, I saw the entanglement and the wordless truth. You have a choice, and your choice is no. Now that no rose up in me like a wave, so strong, so clear, so congruent, so full-bodied certainty in me and my boundary. I pushed her firmly away, looked her in the eye and simply said, no. It was unarguable and irrevocably clear to her that I was done and it was time for her to go. Now I sat there with a profound peace and relief. I'd done it. I'd not betrayed myself, and I'd held what had been one of the trickiest, most entangled and deeply enmeshed boundary issues for me. And it came with sort of a sense of self-respect and renewed self-trust, that had been lost for a very, very long time. The thing I realized in that moment is that it was possible, no matter how deeply we feel powerless, under a spell and lost from ourselves, no matter how deep and impossible to change a boundary issue feels, no matter how long it's been, there is a way, a route out. And while I may have found it the hard way, I had found it and it had worked. And that's why I created Boundary Bootcamp, to lay out that map, to give you the tools and the steps so you don't have to spend years staying in situations that absolutely suck or even are potentially harmful. So in just 4 weeks, you can have the education, the strength and the awareness you need to hold even the gnarliest of boundaries for you, to regain that sense of self-trust and self-respect and start building a life that truly works for you. So I've gone off on that track because if you're in a situation where you need to leave and feel you can't, or if you recognize that boundary issues mean you feel you just can't be kind to you in some areas of life, then please get yourself into Boundary Bootcamp. Now, of course, I'm going to leave a link for that in the show notes, www.beabrillianthuman.com/58. And you can also go directly there. Again, it'd be www.thempaacademy.com/boundary-bootcamp. That'll be lowercase b's. So that brings us to number 9. Number 9 is affirm your willingness to be there when they're ready. So in relational dynamics, especially if it's time to go and take a breather, especially if it's not the grand finale, that is, I found it's kind of all round if you can offer some sense of reassurance as you step away. So it may seem that the other person, can't hear you, doesn't care, but something inside them is listening. So saying things like, I'm here when you're ready, I know we can work this out, and I need to go right now. When you say something, what you're doing there is you're affirming that you're going to come back. You're not just walking out on them. They tend to tear less at the bonds between you, because the stomping out, that's it, we're done, when you don't mean it. Having just told that story, I'm acutely aware that I was doing that. But it doesn't build trust in a relationship. It doesn't nurture that thing. So that reassurance that you'll be there when they're ready, but you're not putting up with this shit right now, is a very different thing. So this isn't only a sound approach, of course, at times when you need to walk away for a bit. I mean, it's actually a really good communication technique, at any heated time at all. And the more that you can offer them statements of intent to work it out together, to hear them, to be there, it's all good. And again, with the caveat, as long as you're kind to you. Which brings us to the final number 10. Number 10 is get help for you. So finally, it's really important to get support for you, especially if you're dealing with a prolonged situation. So again, this is really simple. I'm just saying, number 10, get help for you. Make sure you reach out, talk to a friend or get some professional help with someone like me. But really don't underestimate the value of another perspective in these kind of situations. We all need a helping hand sometimes. So that's your 10, but there is one more thing. So what if you are the source of intense negativity? Well, if that's the case, again, I would give yourself a break. We all have times where we just get stuck in a rut of negativity. But listen to this episode again, especially if it's a habit, and see if you can recognize how there's a part of you that needs to rethink the label, drop the agenda, or go through it. Thinking of it in terms of parts. There's a part of you that gets stuck in that intense negativity, rather than making that your whole self. It's not your whole self. It's not who you are. It's a behavior, and maybe even a repeated behavior. And so looking at it in terms of there's a part of you that does that will help you soften it and begin to look at it in a way which will be more wholesome. So again, give yourself a break and do some MPA. All right, that's it. That's a wrap for today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, taken something away. As I said at the top of the show, if you embrace even one of these, it's going to make a huge difference to you and the person that you're in this situation with. If you like it, give it some love. Let me know. As I said before, you can get in touch, leave a message via the website, drop me a line on social media. There's always a post there on Facebook. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/MPA rocks for the MPA one. There is also a Be a Brilliant Human page as well if you want to find that, but mostly my interactivity is on the MPA rocks page on Facebook. And also, tell someone about it. I'm always saying, if you like what you hear, go tell someone. Nothing spreads the word about a podcast more than letting someone know. There's this fantastic podcast called Be a Brilliant Human with Joel Young. He's ace and his shows are ace. Make sure you go and look it up. They can pull out their phone, get onto whatever podcast platform they're using, stick it in the search, or you can send them to the www.beabrillianthuman.com website and they'll find the latest episodes on the homepage. They can go to episodes, or you can even give them the number, which in this case is 58, and say just put /58 on the end and you'll get to that episode about 10 ways to deal with intense negativity. All right, that's me. I am out of here. Make sure you go and download the MPA sheet if you haven't already. If you've got boundary issues, check that out. If you feel like you need to be more kind to you, go and download the free ebook. All of them are at the show notes. I will see you next week. All that remains is to cue the moo.